Welcome to another Chicks on the Right podcast episode where we have our friend and sponsor of the show, Zach Abraham, with us from Bulwark Capital Management. And we're going to do things a little different today. We're not actually going to talk about the money world or the economy or anything like that. We want to talk, because we've all got kids and we've all got kids that have participated in sports. We want to talk about club sports. There's an interesting article from last year from the Federalist talking about how 70% of teenagers and youth are dropping out of organized sports by age 13 just because of the burnout and the injuries. What's been your experience with club sports?
Yeah, so I've got some interesting experience with this because I played in college, so I grew up really I was doing sports year round.
You're
Football.
Football guy.
Yep, played football. And now I coach it. And so my two sons, 10 and 12, both play youth football. And I recoil at the way that club sports are working right now. Just because what you see is you see a business coming into it. And I remember the first year, my wife and I were just married, and I was asked to help a friend who was coaching a football team. A high school football team, and I coached for a year to help him out. And I remember a parent came up to ask me and said, what can my son do to get a Division I scholarship? And I looked at him and I said, he doesn't have to do anything. And they're like, oh, you mean you think he's already there? And I go, no. No matter what your son does, he's not going to get one. and they kind of look at me and I go, you need to understand something, you guys. Division I athletes are born. Okay,
right.
They're not made.
Totally.
And people are going to convince you to spend mountains of money to give and here's the deal. I can look at your son at the age of 17 and tell you whether he has a snowball's chance in hell or not. And it's just, and like me, I didn't. I was an excellent football player. Why didn't I? Because I was 5'9", 200 pounds and ran a 4.8 40. It ain't going to cut it, right? Like it didn't matter. And I worked my tail off. So I would say, and this whole year-round stuff, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
I went to high school with a guy, and a great guy. He was a couple years younger than me. His name's John Lester. Anybody that knows baseball probably knows him. He made about $250 million playing Major League Baseball. He won 3 World Series, was in the All-Star game multiple times. I went to school with him, and John played every sport. He didn't play these sports year round. And the guy went on to, make $250 million in professional sports. And he played basketball. He played football. He played baseball. It rounds you out. Then the other side of it, though, and we've talked about this part of it, about youth sports and why I think they're so important at this age. They're so important because the kids are getting candied everywhere they go. Right. And the crazy thing it is as a coach that coaches these kids, their parents come up to me all the time and tell me this is the favorite sport they've ever played. And yet we work them. I mean, we work them, and we have a great little team. We made the championship game this year. And what you see, these kids have a hunger for it. They have a thirst. Somebody that is kind to them and good to them and encourages them, but also drives them. They're desperate to be driven.
Yeah, but I think that the ones that don't have a hunger and a thirst are usually gone by the age of 13. 12 or 13 is like the breaking. Don't you think that's a breaking point?
I do, but I think there's so many of them that leave because they've been so candied up to that point,
right.
not because they don't have the ability or even the tenacity to do it. It's that they just, some of these kids come out like me. I was put on a football field in 5th grade. And I just started flying around hitting people. I was a really aggressive kid, right? Some of these kids, it takes a while, you know what I mean? It takes them a while to find their sea legs. And I think what happens is we think we're doing them a favor by soft playing them, right? And really we're not. We're not doing them a favor. And it's amazing to me how we think kids are so much more stupid and so much less perceptive than they are. We were probably the harder on our team. They got to do a lot of special stuff too. I mean, we'd have McDonald's nights on Thursday nights after practice, and we did all kinds of special stuff. But we drove them harder than any other team, probably in the league, and they loved it. Right. And I just think that's everybody's trying to make them feel good rather than get them to be good. and kids know a difference.
Yeah. And I will say, because we have two older kids, we have a 35-year-old and a 30-year-old that both did club sports. One did for soccer and one did for lacrosse. And then our youngest does swim, which, by the way, isn't all year round sport. Swim is all
Yeah.
year round.
Yeah.
Because if
yeah.
you don't swim for 2 weeks, you lose a lot of your ability to do stuff in the water. But the two older kids, neither of them they didn't do their sport in college. But I will ask them today, was it worth it? And they will say, absolutely, it was worth it, because they get up at 5 a.m, sometimes earlier. They have a work ethic. They both are very successful in their careers, and they attribute so much of it to club sports, to getting up in the morning, to the work ethic, to working. I mean, they worked all the time at their sport. And then that's where they cultivated a lot of friendships. They learned how to talk to adults. They learned how to deal with coaches, which basically is like learning to deal with a boss.
Yep.
I mean, there are skills in club sports that you gain that are very, what's the word? Like it transfers over into life.
Yeah.
Do you guys worry at all that like now anymore to play any sport in high school, it's like if you haven't had club sports before that, you're kind of screwed as a kid? It's because now it's starting to seem like such a business and such a moneymaker that now you can sometimes have kids left behind who might be interested in playing something in high school. And then if they didn't participate in those, maybe for financial reasons even, then they don't have the same shot as other kids who've been,
you mean
their parents.
You mean a shot at college, Mock?
No, at high school sports even.
Oh, because I know Gwen, like my daughter, she swims with quite a few kids that, like on her high school team that do not do club, and they do just fine. They do just fine. Yeah, they do okay.
I think so. If it can, I think it could certainly cost some kids that otherwise would be able to play high school sports and would be able to participate. But at the same time, like I was saying, I don't think it changes the end result, especially as it relates to like college, getting college scholarships and things of that nature. But to go, to piggyback off what Daisy was saying, it's the day-to-day skill. Like I tell people all the time, there's no way I would be where I'm at today if it wasn't for the football programs that I was a part of and the things that I was taught and the grit that you learn and the early morning workouts and all that.
Right.
And like you were saying, I still get up at 5:30 every single morning and work out because it was a habit that was built through years of football.
Totally.
And embracing that hardship, embracing the tough it's I want to teach my kids that because that's where all the good stuff is, right? We all avoid it. But all of that getting better is take me to the deep end of the pool, man. Let's make it hard. And then let's learn that that's good, right? That failure, constructive failure, that's how we get better, right? And taking the stigma out of it. But then the other thing I'll say too is that no matter what you do for your kid, you can't make up for a love or a passion for the sport. Meaning,
right.
The way I was with football, I didn't do any club activities. There were kids that did, but I was determined to not let that have me fall behind. And, you look at these kids like, hey, can that sometimes be easier? Sure. But you might not have a basketball court in your backyard, but you got pavement, you got a driveway, you can work on things, right? Like you can always get better. That's the other thing that kind of ticks me off too. On the flip side of this argument is we have to have our kids on club teams or they won't make it. Nonsense.
Right. I think it's not.
If your kid's got the goods and he's driven and wants to do it without club, he'll be just fine.
Yeah. And I think, and the driven thing is a huge thing too. I mean, like I look at the girls that surround my daughter and I've always prayed that my daughter is surrounded by good girls. Believe me, that's like a huge part of like parenting, like in the back end. I'm like, please God, just let her be surrounded by good people. 'Cause you are your friends, right?
I've got a 14-year-old daughter. I'm especially with girls, right?
Yeah. You want them to be. And so being in, club swim, she is surrounded by girls who are ambitious and they're driven and they have a good work ethic and they're good. They don't drink. They don't smoke. They don't do drugs. They're not crazy, boy crazy. You know what I mean? These are good girls. And so I'm thankful for that. So it really, there are a lot of really great benefits about
well,
club
especially if
sports
you're
that,
a kid that's like, if you have any kind of social anxiety whatsoever and you are put into a team setting,
right.
instantaneously you have new built-in friends who
Yes.
are you share a common goal. It's so helpful, I think, for kids that are shy or not
Mhm.
particularly outgoing. That helps them feel like they
Oh,
have a community.
my
It's
gosh, it's
it's
fantastic. Yeah.
it's also a big crutch and a big identity anchor, if you will, during that. One of the things that drives me nuts about the teenage sex change, or like they're like, oh, these kids are confused about their sexuality. You're like, what 15-year-old kid isn't
Right.
freaking? Are you kidding me?
Exactly.
You
You're
don't know
right.
what ends up. You feel
Uh-huh.
like the biggest weirdo, and that's if you're that's if you're the star athlete in the class getting straight A's. You feel that way,
Mhm.
Right.
right? So
Mhm.
the other thing about it is, and it's so funny because we very much in our household, we're academics first, right? At the same
Mhm.
time, we are entertaining the idea of sending our boys to a different high school than we're sending our daughter because of that whole the football program thing, meaning I don't want to sacrifice academics, but I know that football was one of the reasons that I was such a good kid in high school. It was one of the reasons I didn't get in trouble and didn't get DUIs and
Mhm.
didn't do all this stuff because
Right.
I had a purpose. I had something else that I was responsible to that was bigger than me, that was
Mhm.
very important to me. And so I think people look back and go, you were a really good kid in high school. I was, but I wouldn't have been nearly as good a kid without that.
Yeah, I can
Mhm.
see that too with a lot of kids that participate in club sports. So when I see people dissing it, I'm kind of like, I really like a lot of things. I think it depends on the family. We spend a lot of time in our car driving and going
Oh,
to places, and people go, "Oh my gosh, so that takes away from family time." That is our
it's,
family
that
time.
is
Like
family time.
I
Yeah.
spent I spent a lot of time being able to talk to my daughter for hours in the car. I love that time. Like that
Yeah.
is my time. And if I didn't have that time, like if we didn't have club sports, we didn't have this, if she wasn't involved in that, I wonder what we would be doing. We would be sitting on the couch at home on a weekend. Like, would I be engaging as much with her? Probably not. Probably
Probably
not.
not. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think we drove about 250 miles this weekend
Yeah.
doing basketball,
That's some
doing back. Yeah,
bonding time right there on the
yeah,
road, Jack.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I mean, like the cost on the parent. Look, as far as the time goes, like there's many times where and I coach a youth sport. There's times where I'm like, good God, this is crazy,
Right.
right? But the
Yeah.
alternative, like, yeah, I,
It's for
I,
a short it's a short period of time, and then it's over in a flash, and you don't
Yeah.
look back and you're gonna be like, "God, I really wish I was in the car with them. I
days
really
are
wish I was."
long. The
You're
days are
right.
long and the years are short. It's the
Yep.
best.
It's
It's
true.
the best saying I've ever heard because isn't that the
Mhm.
truth, man?
It
So
is. And
true,
this was
Zach.
such a nice diversion. I mean, I know we like to talk to you about
Yes.
the things that you are an expert at, and we will get back to that when we talk to you next week. But this was a nice diversion in
It
the
really
meantime.
was.
Hey,
Yeah. Thank
I enjoy a break too. We've had a little bit going on these last few weeks, right?
Yeah.
Just a
And it's hard
smidge.
to keep up with all the constant changes that Trump is throwing at us, which are all good. But man, it is tough to keep up with it. In the meantime, how do people keep up with you?
Yeah, pretty easy. So you can just Google Know Your Risk Radio podcast or go to bulwarkcapitalmanagement.com. We'll have another one of our webinars coming up, and I want to say in 4 or 5 weeks. So you can sign up there. But yeah, just Google Know Your Risk Radio podcast and got a bunch of great interviews coming up. And we're recapping all this crazy stuff that happens in the markets every single day just to try to keep our listeners up to date. So yeah, we'd love to have more.
Perfect.
So look us up.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thank you,
Zach.
Zach.
All right, ladies, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate, and actual performance may differ. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 24308.